come, and that's why it has been happening for 2,000 years. So this call of blessing coming through Abraham's descendants to the nations, this begins and it's then repeated to Isaac, it's repeated to Jacob. We get a little bit of a hint of it getting more specified when you get into Genesis, the 49th chapter. Widely understood as a messianic prophecy, Genesis 49:10, that says, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes," or until he comes to whom it belongs. There's lots of different ways to translate the Hebrew. "And the obedience of the nations is his." There's a promise to Judah, and through Judah, there will be the obedience of the nations. This is the first hint now of something getting more and more specific. And then we know it's passed on ultimately to David. David is singled out from the tribe of Judah, and it is the descendants of David who are promised with a lasting kingship, one that will ultimately touch the ends of the earth, one that will ultimately rule and reign over the entire world, so that what? The whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of God, because God's heart has always been for the whole earth. I want you to just look ahead for a moment. Take a look in Psalm 105. There are many such psalms we could read, many such verses. Look at Psalm 105, which is also found in 1 Chronicles 16. Psalm 105, verse 1, "Give thanks to the Lord." This is to the people of Israel. "Give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, make known among the nations what he has done." This passion to declare the glory of God to the nations drives followers of Jesus to their knees in prayer and moves them to go to the ends of the earth to sacrifice family and well-being just to make the God of Israel known to the nations. Why? Where does that come from? What's that got to do with the Messiah? This is part of Israel's call and destiny. Sing to him, sing praise to him, tell of all his wonderful acts. Go back to Psalm 47. Psalm 47. This is in Israel's sacred psalm book. "Clap your hands, all you nations. Shout to God with cries of joy." How does this message get to the nations? Do you just write it in a book and that's sufficient? Go back to Exodus chapter 19. Very simple point I'm making. Namely, that God's heart has always beat for the nations, and his calling of Abraham and the people of Israel and the Jewish people and the line of David, his calling upon them has been to make him known to the ends of the earth. I want you to consider that if Jesus is not the Messiah, God has not done anything overt, redemptive, to reach out to the world, to make himself known in several thousand years. He revealed himself to the Jewish people. He revealed himself to Israel. He gave them the covenant at Sinai. And what about the rest of the world? I've challenged rabbis with that question. What about the nations? Well, we pray for the nations and we'll keep our testimony faithful and through that be an example. I said, what about going and telling, declaring his work to the nations? Has God done nothing concrete? I asked a dear, sincere, ultra-Orthodox rabbi that question. I said, so you're telling me and then Jesus is not the Messiah? God has done nothing concrete, overt, to reach out to the nations, to reveal himself and to redeem them. And over 3,000 years, he said, so? Exodus 19, God's purposes for Israel. He's brought them out of Egypt. Verse 4, you yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Priests not only interceded, the priests were supposed to be the teachers of the ways of God to the people. Israel called to be a priestly nation. Now, if you just stop and think for a moment, put this in a Jewish context, not an alien faith. Yeshua, our Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, raises up Jewish emissaries and then sends them to make the God of Israel known. And then as the Gentiles hear, they begin to spread the word, and it continues to grow and increase around the world today, so that there are hundreds of millions of people worshiping the God of Israel through this Jew, Jesus. I wonder how foreign this is after all. I wonder how alien this is. I wonder how un-Torah this is. This seems to be what the scriptures were speaking about. God singles out the line of David and gives promises of greatness and kingship and rule and reign. Look, for example, in Psalm 2. This was probably a coronation psalm. Most scholars, it's my view as well, see Psalm 2 as a coronation psalm. That as David would be installed, or a king from the line of David would be installed, these words would be spoken over him. They ultimately have their fulfillment in the great Son of David, Yeshua. Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers gather against the Lord and against his anointed one. Let us break their chains, they say, and throw off their fetters. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. Then he rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will proclaim the decree of the Lord. He said to me, you are my son. Today I become your father. Words which theoretically could be spoken to a Davidic king, but have extraordinary application to Yeshua, the great Davidic king. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance. In other words, you will rule over the entire world, and you will smash the rebellious. The ends of the earth your possession. You will rule them with an iron scepter. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. So this is a word against the disobedient kings that would rise up in rebellion, but a promise to the son of David, or to the Davidic king. You will rule the nations of the entire world. It's interesting that I know many Christian leaders who pray these very words. God, you said to ask for the nations. And they're asking, may the nations come to know you. May you who have revealed yourself to us be known to the nations. So God calls out Abram and his descendants. Why? So that he can bless them and that they can be a blessing to the entire world. The people of Israel are singled out to be a priestly nation by the way they live, by their following the laws of God, their worship of the one true God, their understanding of right and wrong, their understanding of clean and unclean, pure, impure, sacrifice, atonement. They will be a people that knows the truths of God, that can then be a priestly nation and make him known. And it's promised to the descendants of David that they will rule the entire world. God's heart has never been for Israel and the Jewish people alone. They have been chosen and called for a divine purpose for the entire world for the glory of God. Now, as we go on, I'm just giving some generalities. This concept of a Davidic king who will rule the world, that's the concept that gives birth to this idea of the Messiah, the anointed son of David who will rule the entire world, and during whose reign the entire world will worship the God of Israel, and the disobedient